My name is Donna Luber. I've been part of the senior writers group for just about 2 years now. I've written off and on all of my life. I've always had stories dancing through my head, but failed to put them on paper. And the senior group has helped me with that. The great encouragement, whether it be a family story, which I'm trying to do a book that I will hand down to my children and grandchildren about our family's history and the good stories that go along with that.
Hi, my name is John Galanis. The seniors have taught me that you write what you know. And I figure that Jim Tarbert must have sold life insurance at some time in his life, because he's one hell of a salesman. My wife and I retired about 5 years ago, and about 4 years ago, I think she was afraid I was going to stay in my pajamas every day. And so she went to the senior center and saw Jim Tarbert there, who talked to her about a writers group. And the writers group at the Wenatchee Senior Center has been active now for over 20 years. And he convinced my wife that I should go there and learn how to write. Well, you do write what you know, and I thought about the senior center, and God love her, my mother-in-law, rest her soul, lived with us for 25 years, and many of those years she went to the senior center, and I thought, oh, that's where the old people go so they can play canasta. I don't know. Anyway, I took her up on it, and I went to a meeting about 3.5 years ago, and it was wonderful. Now, I am older, and so I fit right in as a senior, but I think I learned that the writing gives us purpose. You do write what you know, and I like to tell stories, and so I thought maybe writing stories would be fun. And they're not. You know what? It is. And so I started writing stories, and I brought them to the center, and the writers group was so warm and accepting that I didn't feel frightened, like, oh, this isn't for me. And I also belong to Right on the River, and my wife, again, she's a good salesman too. She talked me into entering a competition there about 3 years ago, and when I got the call and says, well, you got third place in this writing competition, that sealed it. And I thought, I think I'll just keep writing because you can do it in your pajamas.
My name is Dale Kraus, and I'm a scientist. I was prompted to join the group because I'm 79 now, but when I was writing a book for the first time, because I had a theory about that I wanted to finally get written down in book form. I'd been doing copyrights, but I hadn't actually published a book. So I was at a meeting, and I was telling somebody about that was by doing it. I needed to find an editor that could help me write the book. And the people said, well, Jim Tarbert is right down at the end of the table. I looked down the table, and here's this gentleman over here. And so after the meeting was over, I went up to him. I said, I understand that there's a place where I can get some help with with editing my writing, because I'm a scientist and we're terrible writers. And where could I do that? He said, well, come to the senior writers group. And he says, all you have to do is we're writing something about a holiday. So just bring something to the group about some holiday during the year that you write up about. So I came and I sat down in this group of people. I didn't know any of them other than I had met Jim. And it turned out that I read this one piece of paper, scared to death about doing it, but I read it, and the other thing you had to do is you had to bring 20 copies of your paper so you could hand them around to the group. So I handed out the copies. I read the thing like that. Well, the next meeting, he talks about that they're publishing holiday tales, and when they hand out the copy of it, my paper is in there. So within a very short period of time, I have my first name in a publication. Now, back 50 years ago, I wrote a dissertation, 2 dissertations in college in chemistry, and And I did get a publication out of that. My name is on it. The major professor got all the credit, but what I was learning is I couldn't write a paper at this point in time to anybody in the form of a dissertation. People are not going to read that. So anyway, 2017, the first one came out. I did find a detail editor and a design person who did this design of this book. Jim helped me walk step by step through how you do it on Amazon.com. It was easy, and it didn't cost, well, I don't remember. It was so small. We didn't, even my wife didn't notice it in the family budget. But we published it for nothing, so I got that done, and then I came with the second one. This was in 2017, and it's called Child of Humans. Oh, and that reminds me something else about the group. When I read stuff from Child of Humans, it's about religion. And I don't know about a lot of people, but in the world in which I live, there's two things you should never talk about: politics and religion. So I put this out, and what I've learned about the Senior Writers Group is we have a very diverse group of people with respect to religious and political beliefs. But the thing that's really neat about the group is they're focused on, did you state your position clearly? Did you use good English? The English teachers that we have in the group, oh, I mean, I hated grammar and all that stuff like that, but the people, that they're very, very pleasant. You know, they say, well, you know, you could have. And in the case of religion on this book, there's one gentleman who's probably 180 degrees separate from where I am. He said, I don't agree with anything. He told me this privately on a coffee hour. He didn't do this in front of the whole group. He said, I don't necessarily agree with anything you wrote, but you needed to clarify these points in what you were writing. That has been very helpful. So when I went to science, which is gyroscopic gravity, which published in 2018, that was the science. It's around a theory of a new theory of gravity. What is interesting now, and the question that came up right here in this group: have we met before? This is the first time I've seen any of the people physically. We've had some email and written some articles, and what I've done is I've written some. It's the only place I know that I can write about politics and survive.
My name is Linda Reed, and I'm a retired teacher. Part of the time I taught English, part of the time I taught music. Moved to Wenatchee 4 years ago, and was looking for some things to do, and saw a notice about a writers group down at Pybus Market, and started going to that just because I love to write, and it sounded like it would be a good thing for me to do. I met Jim there, and that group encouraged me to write, and even to begin to submit some articles to the local magazine called North Central Washington, called The Good Life. And to date, in the last year and a half, I have had 8 articles published in there. So that's been a lot of fun, and it's taught me a lot. So that group just encouraged me to write, and there was no critique or anything. It was just encouragement. Jim, being a part of that group, kept inviting me to come to the Senior Writers Group, and I didn't make it to start coming until February of this year. So I came 3 times before we shut down, and I just loved it and kicked myself for not having come sooner. And what it did for me was to give me a group that did more than just encourage me to write and say, you know, yay, that was great. I had a group that I could bring copies of my writing in. I learned how to number the lines in my writing so that then we could talk about it and say, oh, line 6 instead of, you know, paragraph 10, the second line, and all of that. The people in the group, if there were grammatical errors or things that they thought, should be typos and things like that, they would just circle them on the paper, sign their name to it, maybe make a comment or two, and pass them on to us after we read. And so we got that feedback, and we also got feedback on our content and our voice and our flow of ideas, and I always wanted to know if it evoked some kind of response after I read a poem or a piece. And so I got feedback about that too. And that was really, really helpful to me to continue to kind of fine tune my work. And so I really was disappointed when we didn't get to meet anymore. And it's also great entertainment for anybody to just come and listen. I was always entertained, and sometimes I would keep a story or a poem that somebody read and put it in my file of something I wanted to read again. I got started writing poetry again and submitted a couple of things to a local publication called Whispers of Wenatchee, and it just came out like the middle of August, and I have 4 poems and a story published in there. I never set out to publish. I started out like Donna to write my memoir for my family, not for publication. And it just kind of fell into my lap and started happening. And I found it was so much fun and so rewarding that to share what I'd written, I just kept doing that. But it wasn't at all my intention. So sometimes when I would share something, it would just be something from my memoir that I just wanted to see, how does this hit you? And you think am I getting my story across in a way that my grandchildren and my kids are going to understand it and make sense and find meaning in it?
I'm Jim Tarbert, a member of the Wenatchee Senior Writers Group. I've been asked to describe our group. Since we are writers, rather than public speakers, at least in my case, I've written down a few notes. In 1998, Shirley Peace and Rose Reynoldson started this group to help seniors improve their writing. The original members are long gone, but today, at our last meeting in March, we had 22 members in the group. They come from Leavenworth, Cashmere, Manson, and Wenatchee and East Wenatchee. We meet at 9:30 in the morning here at the Senior Center. The meetings are open to anyone who wants to improve their writing and to anyone who wants to help others improve. I joined the group in 2012 after I finished my family history research and decided I wanted to share my information with relatives. But I had 2 problems. I didn't know how to publish, and I didn't feel my grammar skills would meet publishing standards. So I found this group, and within 2 years, I had learned enough to go ahead with their help and publish my first book. When I look around the table at one of our meetings, I see retired seniors from many occupations and professions with a variety of interests and skills. I'm looking at a long-haul truck driver, a Vietnam veteran, an orchardist, a doctor, a pilot, a newspaper proofreader. I see a scientist, I see housewives, I see a commercial fisherman, a big variety. We also are fortunate to always have at least one teacher who has an English degree who can help us when we get stuck with a grammar problem. Despite the diversity in the group, they all have 2 things in common. They have lots of experience. They've been there, done that, and some of us have the scars to prove it. They all like to tell stories. And they have lots of stories to tell. They can go on forever, typical of a senior group. The goals in the group vary, of course. Most of the members simply enjoy writing, and they like to share the stories at our meetings, where we have a very relaxed social atmosphere. We have coffee, cookies, lots of laughter, and of course, we're a senior group, so you can imagine that we all have memories to share anytime we hear a story, which makes it very enjoyable. A few of the members over time decide they'd like to share their stories with a wider audience. And then they look at publishing stories in magazines or even writing a book of their own. Our meetings are designed to help all of our members meet their goals.
I'm writing nonfiction. I haven't published, with the exception of the holiday tales at the senior center, but I keep the stories together, and one of these days, I might publish. I'm never going to be another Stephen King. I'm not going to make a living out of this. And you know what? I'm retired. I don't have to make a living out of it. I just enjoy writing. This group has taught me how to make my characters come alive, how I can use a dialogue to get my point across, and I learned what an M-dash is. I didn't know that. I have a lot of stories, and I like to extend those stories to regular people, especially as we get more mature, not to say older, because for 40 years I took care of geriatric patients as a doctor. And so a lot of those stories have aha moments, and there's something very intimate about sitting on the bedside of a patient who's dying in an intensive care unit and asking them, what was it all about? You're on the other side, or you're getting real close. What was it all about? And son of a gun, they all say the same thing. It's as though they go to learn how to die school. They all say, doctor, it was only about the love in your relationships. Not the money, not the power, not the prestige. It was only about love. And so I write stories that try and get that message across. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to promote anything. I'm just trying to share what I've learned over 40 years. And you know what they say, write what you know. Yeah, a lot of people do this thing called memoirs. And I thought, well, memoirs, that sounds interesting. What would that be like? And it turns out that memoirs is a form of nonfiction, which is what I write. Now, it hasn't occurred to me to write memoirs, but for those people who are extending their life circumstances to a family that's going to go on and on and on, this is such a gift to them that you cannot reproduce this after you're gone. And so for me, at some point in time, I hope to aspire to write memoirs. The fiction writers are a notch above, I think, the nonfiction writers, because they have an imagination and they can carry a plot and suck you in. And above the fiction writers, in my esteem, are the poets. The poets who can put words together that can move you in a short period of time. But I don't have to aspire to write poetry. I don't have to write a memoir. But all sorts of writers are present in this group. Truck drivers can make driving an 18-wheeler down a street very interesting.